20,000 feet above occupied France, a man plummets through freezing air at terminal velocity. No parachute, no hope, just 60 seconds until impact. His body tumbles through the chaos of aerial combat, past exploding anti-aircraft shells, past burning aircraft, past the wreckage of what moments ago was his fortress in the sky. The ground rushes up to meet him with mathematical certainty. He closes his eyes and waits for the end. But this is not how Staff Sergeant Alan Magee's story ends. This is where it truly begins. To understand how a man survives the unsurvivable, we must first understand where his journey started. January 3rd, 1943. The morning briefing at Molesworth Air Base in England carried the weight of grim necessity. 72 B-17 flying fortresses would navigate across the English Channel toward the western coast of France. Their target, the massive German U-boat base at Saint-Nazaire, a concrete fortress that had become a thorn in the side of Allied naval operations. German submarines launching from this base were strangling supply convoys across the Atlantic, sending thousands of tons of desperately needed supplies to the bottom of the ocean. The base had to be neutralized. Staff Sergeant Alan Magee climbed aboard the B-17, nicknamed Snap, Crackle, Pop, that cold morning with a quiet determination. At just 23 years old, Magee had already proven himself as a ball turret gunner, one of the most dangerous positions on any bomber. The ball turret was a spherical plexiglass cage suspended beneath the belly of the aircraft, barely large enough to fit a man in a fetal position. Two 50 caliber machine guns protruded from this bubble, giving the gunner a complete view of the sky below and around the bomber. It was claustrophobic, freezing, and utterly exposed. If the aircraft went down, the ball turret gunner had mere seconds to hand crank his way back into position, climb through the tiny hatch, and grab a parachute stored inside the fuselage. There was no room for a parachute in the turret itself. For Magee and the crew of the bomber, this would be their 7th combat mission. In the grim mathematics of the air war over Europe, this made Magee the most experienced member of his crew. First Lieutenant Arthur Adams piloted the aircraft, his hands steady on the controls despite knowing what awaited them over France. The crew had heard the stories about Saint-Nazaire. Pilots had given it a nickname that sent shivers down spines: Flak City. The formation of B-17s thundered across the English Channel in tight formation, each aircraft maintaining precise spacing. This wasn't just military discipline, it was survival. The overlapping fields of fire from multiple bombers created a defensive wall of 50 caliber machine gun rounds that could shred attacking fighters. Break formation, and you became an easy target. The countryside of occupied France spread beneath them, a patchwork of fields and villages that seemed impossibly peaceful from 4 miles up. Then came the turn toward the target. Lake Grandlieu appeared below, its waters reflecting the winter sky. The French countryside, beautiful even from this altitude, suddenly erupted in violence. Black clouds of smoke began appearing around the formation with terrifying precision. Anti-aircraft flak. The German gunners on the ground had zeroed in on their altitude, and now 88mm shells were exploding with devastating accuracy. Each black puff represented thousands of white-hot metal fragments designed to shred aluminum skin and human flesh with equal efficiency. At this critical moment, the P-51 Mustang fighter escorts that had accompanied the bombers across France peeled away. Their fuel tanks were nearly empty. They had no choice but to return to base. The B-17s were on their own, lumbering forward at just 180 miles per hour, locked into their bombing run. To hit the target, they had to fly straight and level, making themselves perfect targets for the German guns below. The flak explosions rocked the formation, each burst feeling like a physical blow to the aircraft. Inside, snap, crackle, pop. The crew braced against the turbulence. Through his turret windows, Magee watched the deadly ballet of black smoke bursts, each one seeking to tear their aircraft apart. The sound was deafening even through the roar of the 4 Wright Cyclone engines. The acrid smell of cordite filtered into the aircraft with each near miss. Then Adams spotted something that shouldn't have been there. Contrails at 8 o'clock, long white lines scratching across the sky. In the middle of their own anti-aircraft barrage, German fighters were diving into the formation. It seemed like madness. The Luftwaffe pilots were threading the needle between their own flak bursts to get at the American bombers. These weren't inexperienced pilots. This was precision flying executed with deadly intent. The official mission report would later document what happened next with clinical precision. Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, flying in strings of 4 to 6 aircraft, positioned themselves parallel to the American formation. They flew ahead, at least a mile in front of the lead group, then executed a coordinated turn that brought them diving back towards the bombers. The German pilots had calculated their approach angle perfectly, coming in below the field of fire from the top turret guns while staying above the ball turret's effective range. They approached from 11 o'clock, impossibly fast, their closing speed making accurate defensive fire nearly impossible. The nose gunners opened fire, their twin 50 calibers blazing, but the tracers seemed to pass harmlessly around the attacking fighters. The Focke-Wulf 19s were incredibly fast, capable of speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour in their diving attacks. They closed to within 50 feet of the bomber wingtips before opening fire with their 20mm cannons and machine guns, so close that collision seemed inevitable. Then they would quarter roll away, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared, only to set up for another pass. The attacks came in rapid succession, each wave of fighters screaming through the formation before the gunners could properly track them. The Focke-Wulfs completely ignored the anti-aircraft fire bursting all around the American bombers, flying straight through the deadly flak with apparent unconcern. It was a level of skill and aggression that stunned the American crews. Magee rotated his ball turret, tracking targets as they flashed past. A Focke-Wulf went inverted beneath the aircraft, close enough that Magee could see the details of its paint scheme. He squeezed his triggers, and the turret shook with the recoil of both 50 caliber guns firing simultaneously. Bright tracers arced out from the turret, every 5th round glowing to show the gunner where his bullets were going. But the German pilot was too fast, too skilled. The fighter was already gone, a shrinking speck against the sky. The attacks continued, wave after wave. The Germans came from different angles, head-on, from the sides, from below, from behind. Each time, the air filled with tracers as the bomber gunners fought back. Occasionally, someone would claim a hit, but through the chaos of battle, it was impossible to confirm kills. Aircraft were going down, both American and German, spinning toward the earth trailing smoke and flame. Through the maelstrom of fire and explosion, Magee heard the call over the intercom, 3 minutes to target. The formation leader, an aircraft nicknamed S4 Sugar maintained course despite the onslaught. Every other bomber in the formation was waiting for the lead aircraft to release its bombs. That would be the signal for everyone else to drop. The captain of S for Sugar felt the enormous weight of responsibility. If he broke formation or dropped early, the entire mission would fail. He held his course with iron determination as German fighters concentrated their fire on his aircraft. Below them, on the ground near Saint-Nazaire, German anti-aircraft crews worked their guns with mechanical efficiency. The 40mm Flak 28 guns spat out 120 rounds per minute, filling the sky with a curtain of explosive shells. The heavier 88mm Flak guns fired slower but with devastating power, their high explosive rounds calibrated to detonate at the bomber's altitude. The German gunners had been tracking the formation since it crossed the coast, plotting trajectory and altitude with precision instruments. Each shell was fused to explode at exactly 20,000 feet, creating a killing zone that the bombers had to fly through to reach the target. Inside the aircraft, Magee felt they were close to the drop zone. They had survived this long, just a little farther. Then everything changed in an instant. An 88mm shell exploded close enough to send shrapnel tearing through the aircraft's thin aluminum skin. Magee felt a blast of icy wind on his face, the intense cold of high altitude rushing through new holes in his turret. But his chest felt warm, strange. He looked down and saw tears in his leather flight jacket. Then he saw the blood. Multiple pieces of shrapnel had penetrated the turret and embedded themselves in his chest. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had to get out. He couldn't bail out from the ball turret. There was no room for a parachute down here. His only chance was to hand crank the turret back to the correct position, climb through the hatch, and retrieve his parachute from inside the fuselage. His hands moved to the manual crank, ignoring the pain in his chest, ignoring the wind buffeting the turret, ignoring the sounds of ongoing combat all around him. The turret slowly rotated into position. He pushed open the hatch and pulled himself up into the fuselage, adrenaline overriding the pain of his injuries. The scene inside the aircraft was chaos. The waist gunners were firing their weapons, spent shell casings littering the floor. The roar of engines mixed with the hammer of machine guns and the whistle of wind through dozens of holes in the fuselage. Magee grabbed for his parachute and his heart sank. It was damaged, torn by shrapnel. The silk canopy might not deploy properly. It might not deploy at all. But if the aircraft went down, a damaged parachute was better than no parachute. He struggled to breathe, his chest wounds making each breath a struggle. He needed help. The radio operator might have a spare chute, or they could attempt a tandem jump. He was moving toward the radio operator's position when another massive explosion rocked the aircraft. This wasn't a near miss, this was a direct hit. The B-17 shuddered like a living thing in agony. Sparks flew. Men were thrown to the floor by the impact. Magee fought his way to a window and looked up, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A Focke-Wulf 190 was diving straight at them, all guns firing. The cannon rounds and machine gun bullets walked across the right wing, tearing through metal and fuel tanks. Then the wing was gone, simply gone, torn clean off by the devastating firepower. Without its right wing, the B-17 immediately went into a violent spin. The aerodynamic forces were overwhelming. The aircraft corkscrewed downward, centrifugal force throwing everyone inside against the walls and floor. Magee felt consciousness slipping away as the G-forces overwhelmed him. Everything went black. Second Lieutenant Glenn Harrington, the navigator, saw Magee lying unconscious near the gaping hole where the wing had been attached. He grabbed Magee's collar and tried to shake him awake, tried to drag him toward the escape hatch, but the spinning aircraft was generating forces that made movement almost impossible. Then the inevitable happened. Magee's unconscious body slid toward the massive hole in the fuselage and disappeared into the slipstream. Harrington watched in horror as Magee fell out of the dying aircraft without a parachute. Magee came to consciousness during the fall. For a moment, he didn't understand what was happening. Then the full horror of his situation became clear. He was falling, free falling through 20,000 feet of air with no parachute. He scrabbled at his chest, searching desperately for the ripcord that wasn't there. His damaged parachute was still inside the aircraft, spinning toward Earth hundreds of feet above him. The wind screamed past his ears. The ground below was growing larger with terrifying speed. At terminal velocity, a human body falls at approximately 120 miles per hour. From 20,000 feet, that meant Magee had less than 60 seconds before impact. He tumbled through the air, unable to control his descent. Below him, the target of the mission, Nazaire, spread out like a map. The irony wasn't lost on him even in his terror. He had come here to drop bombs on this base, and now he was falling toward it like a bomb himself. Magee later recalled the absolute terror of watching the ground approach. He couldn't stop it, couldn't slow it, couldn't change it. The only thing he could do was pray. He found himself negotiating with God, bargaining for his life. He was only 23 years old. He knew nothing of life yet. There was so much he hadn't done, hadn't seen, hadn't experienced. The landscape spun below him, the German base, the coast, the trees. Everything was growing larger, more detailed. He could make out individual buildings now, individual trees. A strange calm settled over him in those final seconds. He had done everything he could. There was nothing left but acceptance. He rolled onto his back and closed his eyes, surrendering to his fate. The last thing he saw was the sky above him, the same sky filled with exploding flak and burning aircraft that he had been fighting through moments before. Alan Magee plummeted toward the St. Nazaire railway station at terminal velocity. The station's roof was made of glass panels arranged in a steep inverted V shape, a skylight designed to let natural light into the platforms below. Magee's body struck this glass roof with the force of a small bomb. The glass shattered into millions of pieces. His limp form crashed through the skylight and came to rest on steel girders suspended above the railway tracks. German guards stationed at the railway heard the tremendous crash and rushed to investigate. They found what they expected to find: another dead American airman, one more casualty of the air war. They climbed up to the girders to retrieve the body. Then someone noticed that the body was still breathing. A frantic shout went up. "Get a doctor! The American was alive!" Magee regained consciousness in a white room. His first thought was that this must be the afterlife. White sheets, white walls, a sense of peace after the chaos of battle. Then he saw the German doctor standing at the foot of the bed, and reality came crashing back. He was alive. Impossibly, incredibly, he was alive. The doctor explained what had happened. his tone a mixture of professional clinical observation and genuine amazement. Magee had fallen directly onto the glass roof of the railway station. On either side of where he landed were concrete platforms with hard roofs, instant death. But the centre section of the station was covered by this glass skylight with its steep, inverted V shape. The multiple layers of Magee's flight suit, thermal suit, and leather jacket had provided some cushioning. The glass had given way rather than providing a solid impact surface, absorbing some of the energy of the fall. The steel girders beneath had caught him before he could fall the final distance to the concrete platforms below. It was a series of incredibly unlikely circumstances that had resulted in survival rather than certain death. But survival had come at a cost. Magee's right leg was broken, his right ankle was shattered, he had 28 separate shrapnel wounds from the flak burst that had hit his ball turret. Internal injuries that the doctors were still cataloguing. His arm had been nearly severed and had required extensive surgery to reattach. The medical staff worked for hours to stabilize him, stitching and setting and bandaging. The survival became known as the miracle of Saint Nazaire. German soldiers spoke about it in hushed tones. Medical personnel documented it in their reports with evident disbelief. A fall from 20,000 feet without a parachute should be universally fatal. The physics were simple and unforgiving. Terminal velocity, impact force, human fragility. Yet here was a man who had survived. But miracles have their limitations. Magee was now a prisoner of war. As soon as he was stable enough to move, German troops transported him to a POW camp in Austria. The days in the camp were filled with questions about the mission, about his crew. Had anyone else from Snap, Crackle, Pop survived? He knew the B-17 had crashed somewhere near the coast, but the chaos of battle had prevented him from seeing who had bailed out, who had gone down with the aircraft. Months later, Magee was walking through the POW camp when he saw a familiar face. Staff Sergeant James Gordon, his tail gunner from Snap, Crackle, Pop. The reunion was emotional and surreal. Gordon explained that after the wing was torn off, he had managed to bail out with his parachute. He had landed on the beach and been immediately captured by German troops. Gordon stared at Magee as though seeing a ghost. Everyone had assumed Magee was dead. Harrington had seen him fall out of the aircraft without a parachute. There was no possible way to survive that fall. Yet here he was, walking and talking, very much alive. The final accounting of the mission made for sobering reading. Out of 72 B-17s that had taken off that morning, 7 were completely destroyed. 47 more were damaged, some so badly they would never fly again. 70 crew members were listed as missing in action. 5 more were confirmed dead. 3 crew members had survived from Snap, Crackle, Pop, Magee, Gordon, and one other. The rest had perished when the aircraft crashed. The mission was officially classified as a success by Allied command. The B-17s had dropped 342 bombs on Saint Nazaire, but the reality was more sobering. Only 26 bombs had landed within 1,000 feet of the target point. The massive concrete U-boat pens, built by the Germans using slave labor and designed to withstand aerial bombardment, had suffered minimal damage. The submarines continued to operate from the base. The strategic impact of the mission was negligible. The human cost was enormous. In 1945, as the war in Europe drew to a close, Alan Magee was liberated from the POW camp and returned to the United States. The military awarded him the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat and the Air Medal for meritorious conduct. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Magee's story came after the war. Despite everything, the terror of combat, the wounds, the fall, the long months as a prisoner, he didn't develop a fear of flying. Instead, he pursued a pilot's license and went on to work in the airline industry, spending his career in the sky that had nearly killed him. In 1995, 52 years after his impossible fall, Magee returned to Saint-Nazaire. He stood in front of the building that had once been the railway station, looking up at the roof where he had crashed through the glass skylight. The building looked different now, renovated and repurposed in the decades since the war. Magee remarked that it seemed smaller than he remembered. Of course, the last time he had seen it, he had been looking at it from 4 miles up, falling at 120 miles per hour toward what should have been certain death. Alan E. Magee lived a long life. He passed away peacefully in San Angelo, Texas, on December 20th, 2003, at the age of 84. He had survived the unsurvivable, defied impossible odds, and lived to tell a story that challenged every understanding of human limits. His fall from 20,000 feet without a parachute remains one of the most remarkable survival stories of World War II, a testament to the unpredictable nature of fate, the role of incredible luck, and the stubborn resilience of the human body when faced with circumstances that should be absolutely fatal. The story of the ball turret gunner who fell from the sky and lived serves as a reminder of the countless moments of individual drama that played out during the air war over Europe. Behind every statistic, every mission report, every casualty figure, there were human stories of courage, terror, loss, and occasionally, against all odds, miraculous survival.